My guide, and who I work very, very closely with, Loki, I think most people don't realise how closely linked he is to our Ascension and therefore our shadow work. Why do we even need to do shadow work? Well, there's always a part of us that shoves things down under the rug, thinking, oh, it's alright to do that. That part of us won't mind us doing that. That inner child that was hurt way back when won't mind if we just kind of shove their feelings out of the way because it's more convenient. You know, we want to put our best foot forward. I'm naturally optimistic. I've had many things happen to me in life. I'm a spinal injured paraplegic, but I still get on with life. I love nature and animals. But I'm always optimistic. A smile is never far from my face, and it's never a fake smile. You know, I'm just genuinely like that. But that doesn't mean that I haven't myself as well shoved things under the rug. Maybe not consciously, but subconsciously. We tend to do that in life, and life can have us do that just because of how we are. People going to work. You know, you've got your life. You've got to concentrate on other things, and we don't really have time to even think about that or even acknowledge it, even be aware that it's going on. But I started my shadow work journey really when I started, consciously became aware that I was doing my shadow work, because I can think back even further than that and realise that I've been doing that for longer than I even realised. But when I became aware I was doing it was when I became an observer of my mind chatter, and it was usually when I was doing some run-of-the-mill thing, maybe mucking out my horse or something that I did on a regular basis, and it was just second nature. Then my mind would start running on old conversations, or maybe a conversation I had the other day, and I wish I'd have said that, or that person didn't see me correctly, and all of these things. And you put yourself in this vibration of what was happening then, the inaccuracy of how you thought you'd been seen and what you should have said, and then I started realising, hang on a minute, this is all going through, I already know all of this. You know, why am I on record all the time? Why am I pressing the button on everything I already know, everything that's already happened? Why am I reliving that and reliving that and you know? So you bring yourself into the now, you become the observer basically, don't you? But shadow work, really, you're changing your frequency, because I mean we're all elevating at the moment. This is the evolution of consciousness. So this natural change in frequency is triggering a lot of stuff within each and every one of us, but also on the grander scale, as we can all see, because of the chaos that's going on in the world. I mean, I don't actually watch the news anymore. I've gone well past that. I think once you awaken to the bigger picture, once you know, you know. It doesn't mean that you don't pay attention to anything, but it just means that you're not going to be consumed by that story, that narrative that's coming through the news every day. And I haven't even got TV anymore. But my shadow work really has been acknowledging patterns in my own life. You know, again, the same scenarios playing out, but even maybe with different people. You know, you get yourself into the same old situation, and why am I always in a situation where, you know, I feel like I'm being trodden on, or disrespected, or just not acknowledged, or, you know, emotionally manipulated, or whatever it is, whatever the pattern it has been for you. But for me, I had to get right down deep into why. You know, I mean, so I took myself way back. One of my earliest memories of having this feeling, you know, how was I put into this frequency? It's not really mine, it's not really me. Where did it come from? So when you take that back and you start thinking about other scenarios, it doesn't mean that you then go back into living in the past and start dwelling in that place. You don't have to make those old memories and those old feelings your permanent address. You know, you just go there, you're a visitor, right? You go back, you're the visitor, but from an observer's standpoint now. You're not the visitor that is living in it and feeling it and then therefore perpetuating the patterns. You're now going back and visiting those moments as a slightly more detached observer. So now you can say, okay, I remember, yeah, way back when I was a kid, and it was a very innocent comment someone threw my way, but why did it shut me down? Why did it make me think, oh no, I'm not supposed to say that, or not? And it shuts you down. And then so through life, maybe you have a hard time speaking up for yourself, or maybe you have a hard time living a gift, being creative, because maybe someone threw a comment at you one day. Maybe they were just having a bad day and they just wanted to put you down. There's something going on with them. But now they put that frequency onto you, because now you're feeling that you're not justified to open up. So you're living this frequency that was not really yours, it was given to you. So you kind of work through that, and just acknowledging that is the transmutation, because now you're looking at it as an observer. And so you're doing all this shadow work, and maybe you've been through much heavier traumas than someone throwing an odd comment at you and putting you down. Maybe you've been through some real dramatic stuff that a lot of people could just cave in. But you're still here, you're still living, but you're playing out patterns and you're behaving in a way that is of a frequency that someone else has sort of, it's an inheritance of a frequency. And so when you do your own shadow work, you kind of get to the bottom as you take the time it takes. It might take months, it might take years. Most of the time it takes years to really work on all these things. And just when you think you've cleared something, then there's something else that comes up that triggers you, and then you think, okay, I'm being triggered, let me not attack whoever or whatever it was that triggered me, let me take it back, take it in. If I'm triggered, there was already something in there to be triggered. It was just waiting for the right person to come along and annoy you, to trigger you, and they're really showing you what's really going on in here, all right? And so you go through this journey and you're removing, you're going through the layers basically, and all these ripples, all these frequencies that have been lapping up on your shore, you're starting to cancel them out, because you are now coming back into your own self. Your own frequency is changing, so now your own ripple is rippling out and meeting ripples that have been coming at you all your life that were never yours, and it's causing this interference pattern between the two frequencies, and that in itself can feel chaotic. Okay, it's interference, it feels like chaos, but you sit back and you say it's okay. You reassure yourself, I know what's going on, I know why this is feeling chaotic, I know why these emotions are coming up while I'm feeling upset, or maybe in lack, or in fear, or shame, or all these feelings. That is the chaos, that is the interference pattern of you now being an observer, coming into your own frequency, that is butting up against those ripples that are coming from the past. So there's the chaos. And so you continue doing this work, and maybe you've been at it for a good long time now, and you know you've been clearing, and any physical symptoms that are now coming up, possibly, not always, but possibly, that are to do with your changing frequency, and therefore maybe there are certain habits and your diets, maybe they can't live in this new frequency now, you need to change things, you need to become healthier. And so you're way on your way now to, you're elevating, your frequency is elevating. So why is it that when you feel much freer and lighter and things are getting better and you're coming into your own more, you're feeling more of your self-worth, so why is it then that something else comes along and you think, what? I thought I dealt with that. I'm sure I dealt with that. I went through all of this. And you think, well, all right, there was something left, a bit of residual energy left. Okay, let's sort that out. And you sort that out, and that it's not as much of an extreme process to go through now this time, because you've already done the heavy load work. But now there's something else coming. Okay, well, I know what this is. I've done this before. Let's just deal with this. So you deal with it. and then you feel freer and lighter and you're getting on with it, and then something else comes in and you're like, but I thought I dealt with that as well. What's going on? And what is really happening is that because you've now cleared to an extent that you are coming into your own, and now you are of your own vibration rather than of an inherited vibration. That's not to say that, you know, the vibrations from the past and from our ancestors, obviously our ancestors hold a lot of wisdom, so we embrace that wisdom and we carry it forwards with us. But there are some things that are not so healthy to bring with us that came from our ancestors. You know, they had their traumas as well, and so, and their habits and their patterns, and they would have come from somewhere further back from them because they then inherited that. So what's now happening is that your channel has become so clear and your frequency is now spreading out. Now you've made space for more ancestral patterns and frequencies to come through, because they need clearing too. You know, the evolution of consciousness and ascension isn't just about a few people here and there being awakened and raising their frequency. We are like the cleanup crew, because what we're doing by doing our own inner work, we've now channeled through to deeper stuff, to our roots. We've now, you know, like I always say, the deeper the roots, the taller the crown. Literally, the further down you can go into your root system, and to clear that out and to have that free flow of nutrients coming up from the root, up the stem and to the crown, that is really just your connection. So your crown, your connection to the higher realms, you become even closer to them because you're raising your frequency. You are tapping into the higher realms. So now your communication, your language with them is becoming more fluent. So this is what's going on really. So what's happening is after you've done your inner work, you're now tapping into much deeper ancestral traumas, and they're all coming through to be cleared. They're like, oh yeah, oh, what a relief, you know, there's someone in our ancestral line much further on into the future, they're doing the work and they're actually managing to stick with it to the point now where it's starting to free all of us up. You know, the whole ancestral lineage is now starting to, there's a flow now that can come through you. So you're not just, when you say I'm channeling, you're not just channeling from up above, you're also channeling way back when to your ancestors, and that channel is becoming so clear now, and the wisdom that comes from them, as well as the wisdom that is coming from the higher realms, is all now able to come through, because you have literally gone in and cleared the drains. Alright, and clearing the drains is not very pleasant. You know, all the stuff that comes up, it stinks, and you know, it creates a mess. And you got to clear it. Once it's clear, okay. Loki has got many names. The trickster god, the god of mischief, chaos. But my experience, my direct, uninterrupted, very, very close experience and relationship with Loki that came to me when I wasn't actually looking for anything at all. I've never been of any particular belief system, I'm not religious, which is probably why Loki and I fit like a glove, because Loki is definitely not restricted to any kind of honed in, ruly kind of construct or belief or religion or anything like that. He's very open, which is probably why he's such a complex figure in Norse mythology. He's got the reputation of creating chaos and being mischief and being tricky, very cunning and clever, but he's also very wise. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't just go around pulling pranks because he's an immature prankster. That is not Loki at all. If you think Loki is a nuisance, then you may as well say that autumn is a nuisance, because in autumn things fall. That's why it's called fall. Yes, lower and lower and lower on the horizon, each and every day until we get to the solstice, the winter solstice. And so the sun is falling, the leaves are falling, you know, nature, when it sacrifices itself to itself, which Odin showed us when he hung himself upside down, he literally inverted his crown. Like the trees do, they drop their crown, their leaves, they drop them to the ground, they drop them to the roots, because the soil, which is made up of dead matter, and waste and all kinds of stuff, that is the nutrient that feeds spring growth. So Loki, when these stories and tales say about Loki as creating chaos, he's bringing things down, he's you know, been responsible for the death of Odin's son, you know, Odin, Loki's blood brother and best friend. He was responsible for the death of Balder, Odin's son, because the sun is naturally going to fall, okay? And that is what the symbolism really is about. It's no coincidence that in the autumn, when the leaves drop from the deciduous trees, and then what becomes more visible, what becomes more noticeable, is like the mistletoe that lives on the tree is now totally exposed because all the leaves have fallen off. You see the mistletoe there, so it's no coincidence that the story goes that Loki helped somebody a blind man who was aiming an arrow at Balder because they were having a game, because Balder said, throw anything at me, nothing in the world can hurt me, but apparently except for mistletoe. It's no coincidence then that Loki was the one that laced the arrow with the mistletoe that killed Balder. You know, it's just all in parallel. In the autumn, when the sun falls, it gets lower and lower in the sky, everything else falls, nature sheds and drops to the ground, and then you see that mistletoe. I mean, to me that is no coincidence, and so I relate that story to autumn, to fall, and that Loki is directly linked with fall, because he is actually directly linked to the whole cycle. So no matter what anyone does, no matter what anyone wants to cling to, no matter how inconvenient it is, Loki is going to make sure that the fall happens. And that is not mischief, it's not trickery, that is healthy maintenance of this self-sustaining ecosystem that needs the cycles, because the cycles feed, it feeds growth. You know, spring growth comes from that transmuted dead matter, fallen matter that occurred during the autumn, and then through the winter it's all in the ground, all the worms are doing their work and they're moving through the soil and everything's being transmuted. That is all that energy, all that waste, everything that fell, now becoming a useful nutrient for spring. And that nutrient is what feeds Ascension. All the, you know, the seeds germinate, things start sprouting and growing upwards, ascending. And this is no different from us, where we need to kind of fall in a way, because that is how we sink into our shadow, to do that shadow work and to transmute all of that into something useful and nutritious that we can use to grow, to ascend in frequency. And so I think, to me, it's obvious how closely linked Loki is to Ascension. And yeah, it can be inconvenient and a nuisance to have to stop for a minute and consider your own shadow and do your own shadow work. But at the end of the day, it's very useful and very beneficial. So I don't think it's correct, really, that Loki has this, it's been misinterpreted as a trickster or mischief maker. You know, okay, so in the stories it goes that Thor, his wife, had beautiful long golden hair. Apparently that is associated with the golden fields of wheat. So when Loki comes along in this story and he cuts her hair off, everyone's thinking, oh, how nasty, what a mischief, he must have been just wanting to create chaos, you know, and Thor was angry with him. Well, if the symbolism of her hair is the wheat, of the fields of wheat, and this beautiful long golden hair, Loki comes to cut it off, that's the symbolism of harvest. You know, so Loki is saying, okay, you've got this beautiful field of golden wheat, but you can't hoard it, because if you leave it there, weather's going to change, autumn's coming, it's going to start, you know, you're going to get a lot of rain, and it's just going to go to waste. It's going to ruin the wheat. So you make hay while the sun shines, you know, let's cut this, let's harvest this. And so there's symbolism there again, where Loki is saying, okay, it's time for harvest now. It's time for this to fall. So I think, to me anyway, I've not read this perspective anywhere. This is just my own perspective, and also my own experience of being so closely linked with Loki, and experiencing how he operates, and what this energy, this expression of consciousness called Loki, what it's really about. Now Ragnarok, to me, that is not the end of the world. People say, oh, you know, that is what Ragnarok means, you know, when the gods all clash, you know, Clash of the Titans, they all, like, they kill each other, this one kills this one, and then this one kills this one, and then, you know, the sun and the moon get eaten up, and everything crashes and falls, and that's the end. I don't think that is what it is. And again, my perspective on this is nothing that I have ever read anywhere, it's just my perspective. And my perspective is that Ragnarok is the shadow work. Because, as I've said, shadow work, what you're doing is, Ascension means that you're going to be up-leveling, okay? You're going to be, your frequency is going to become higher. You're going to be more in tune and in more of a fluent dialogue with the higher realms, your higher self. And so, as these frequencies from the past that have been lapping up on your shore for most of your life, that were never really yours, they came from the past, from your ancestors, and everything that they have experienced, these frequencies have caused a wave that has been lapping up on your shore. So as you start doing your shadow work and you start clearing your own inner self, and you start doing the work on your own past, and then that then starts clearing the way to doing the work on anything else that's come through your ancestral lineage, your frequency now is creating its own ripple effect, and it's butting up against the ripple effects coming from your ancestral lineage. That then creates that interference, that chaos. To me, that is the clash of the so-called gods, okay? That is because it's that you're cancelling these frequencies out. The old frequency that you inherited, that was not yours, that you're trying to now come into your own frequency, you're raising your vibration, your frequency is cancelling the old inherited frequencies out, and then the interference pattern is the chaos. That is where, you know, this god kills this god, and, you know, Odin gets eaten by Fenrir, and all of this. And really, it's just a cancelling out of the frequencies. And that what happens then is that your frequency that is butting up against the old inherited frequency that you're now trying to cancel out, what happens then? What is born out of that? What is born out of that is like the phoenix rising from the ashes. It's a higher octave. So now this is the act of ascension. You are ascending out of that old lower vibration, that old world, that old earth. So you are literally cancelling that out, and you're coming into a higher frequency. You are now in fluent conversation with the higher realms. You are now bringing stuff down here. You are now creating a new earth from that higher perspective, from that higher frequency. And, you know, where we are now, the third dimension, it's a place of we experience time. We're time travelling here because, you know, the third dimension, there's space here. It's a wavelength that is long and slow and a lower frequency wave. That's what it is. It's an elongated wavelength. So that stretched out wavelength actually creates space. And when you create space between the peaks of the wavelength, there's going to be time that's needed to traverse that space to the next peak, you see? In between the peaks you've got the space. So this third dimension is time, space, distance, whereas a higher frequency is a short wave. The peaks are much closer together, so you haven't got much distance to travel between the peaks of the waves. So time is completely different, and it's no accident that in these fictional films, when someone gets taken off into space and they think they've only been gone 5 minutes, and when they get back all their relatives have aged years. Well, that's because they've been to the higher realms where the frequency is higher, the wave is shorter, so there's less time, there's less space between the peaks of the waves, so there's less time. And then they come back down here again and experience a world where the frequency length is so much more elongated and stretched out that now the time and space and the time to travel in between the peaks is so much longer that people have aged where you haven't when you left the earth. So that is not really, you know, you see that in the films, but it's actually not fiction, is it? We're actually being told something.